Alright, y'all. It's time to do another one of these things. Another big, long, hard romp through my anime list. Last time I talked about every show I had ever dropped and why I dropped those shows. This time I'm going to talk about every show I've ever completed and what I think about it. Now, I'm not going to do actually every show I've completed because you'll see that on my Mal page, there's a lot of shows that have scores. Anything I've watched since 2014 has a score and a little write-up about how I feel about it. That's because my opinions changed so much in the time before 2014 that when I got back to watching anime and writing about it professionally, I decided to just start my scoring from there. So there's plenty of shows, including some of my old favorites, that don't have a score, don't have any comments. Some of them I've even talked about in videos before, but haven't rewatched all the way through in order to give them a score. So basically, anything that doesn't have a score, we're gonna look at and I'll discuss how I feel about it. This is going to be a series of 30-minute videos that release every other day, so that it doesn't just blitz out 7 hours of content in a fucking day like the last one did. Anyway, the very first thing, we've got it sorted by type here because we're not going to do music videos because most of them I don't remember enough to tell you. And most of them have scores anyways because I rewatched almost every music video for that project. But yeah, we're just going through stuff that has no score and is at minimum a short film. So starting with Cowboy Bebop, first anime I was really a huge fan of. Obviously, I completely adore Cowboy Bebop. I've seen it 5 or 6 times. I've made several videos about it. I just still haven't completed a rewatch since 2014, in spite of making videos about it. It's just a show I've seen so many times that it really sticks in my mind, and it's hard for me to not have something to say about it, almost. It's an absolute classic. It's probably perfect. I don't know if I'll end up giving it a 9 or a 10 or what, because, like, I don't think every episode of the show is equally amazing. There's definitely the really good ones, some that are like, whatever. I was rewatching the show recently for the sake of a video I had planned. I just didn't end up, I think I made it through 8 episodes total. And, like, you get to episode 6, Sympathy for the Devil, not a very good episode. It has some interesting things in it, some interesting, setups for things that are going to happen later. But not the most interesting story in the show so far. So, not every episode is perfect, but it's still such an overall great show with such a just perfect aesthetic and attitude. And, it's hard for me to imagine it wouldn't still be one of my favorites upon completion, but gotta rewatch it anyways before I give it a score. Trigun was also one of my favorite anime for a while. Back in 2005, it was what I considered my number one. Which is a really fun and interesting show about a pacifistic man on a desert planet. I'm not going to review each of these shows in the process of this. I'll just tell you how I felt about it. I was really into it. I tried to rewatch it years later in probably 2009, and I remember thinking that the early episodes definitely aren't as good. It takes a while to find its footing. While, Vash himself is interesting in the early episodes. It's an entertaining show, but it's pretty dumb. And the individual episodic plot lines in the early episodes are not very interesting. It's really when the plot gets moving that the show kind of takes on a deeper self. But I haven't rewatched it all the way through since then, so I don't know how I feel about it now. I'm going to, part of what I'm going to do here is also estimate the score I would give. So Cowboy Bebop, I'm estimating either a 9 or a 10. Trigun, I would estimate either a 7 or 8. I don't know what it would be. I haven't seen enough of it in long enough. Honey and Clover, I really enjoyed that show. It was deeply emotional. It was almost difficult to watch at times because the characters kind of get put through the emotional ringer sometimes. I've actually never seen season 2 because I was afraid to watch it because everyone told me season 2 was really depressing, and so I just kind of avoided it. But season 1 was it's a really good college show. Definitely recommended for people who are in college. And it's a good show for artists. If you're someone who's struggling to find a creative voice or figure out what the fuck you're trying to do with your life, This is that kind of show. And, I watched it at a time where I was trying to figure that shit out, so it was pretty resonant with me. Probably give it an 8 if I saw it now, going by my memories. Dot Hack Sign, I did a whole podcast about this in the Old Ass Anime Cast. I think this show is pretty bad. It has interesting things about it. It has great design sense. It's got a neat premise and some memorable bits, but it's just so fucking slow and boring, and the dialogue is really bad, and I think it's a overall bad show. I'd probably give it like a 3 if I rewatched it now. Deers. This was, if I remember correctly, now we're finally getting into shows I don't really remember. See, like, the ones we've talked about so far are shows that were important to me at some time that, like, I felt a way about. There's a lot of shows I just binged in 2007 because they existed, and this is one of them. Deers, I'm pretty sure, is a harem show about, like, alien girlfriend. Aliens. It's the epitome of the mid-2000s harem show. Who did this one? It was I want to say it was like Peach Pit or something. Like, was this the one that was done by them? Yeah, Peach Pit, which is kind of weird because it's a I think maybe this was Peach Pit's attempt to do Chobits, which was also by an all-female art team, and was a magical girlfriend show of a similar style. But yeah, I mean, it's totally generic. It's like the epitome of a hair. I think at the time I gave it like a 6, and if I watched it now I'd probably give it like a 3 or a 4 because there's nothing interesting about it. Full Metal Panic. Full Metal Panic was pretty fun. This was a show that Gonzo had adapted from light novels in like the early 2000s, way before light novel adaptations became like the norm, and it has really entertaining fish out of water comedy because it's about a guy who's a military soldier. He's like a human weapon, who has to go to high school to protect this girl, and just his interactions with regular people and the, again, fish out of water comedy was really strong. I would say this is a show where, like, it has a lot of dramatic stuff in it, and it has, like, some kind of moving emotional moments, but I really felt like the comedy was the strongest part of the show, which is probably why they made Full Metal Panic Fumofu, the next on the list, which is like a just comedy version of Full Metal Panic that doesn't continue the story. They later made a second season by Kyoto Animation. I've only seen the first episode. It was really good. I just never got around to watching the rest. But yeah, Full Metal Panic, I'd probably give like a 6, and Fumofu probably like a 7, going on memory. But they're both pretty entertaining shows. I know a lot of people didn't like the original Full Metal Panic adaptation because I guess it wasn't super faithful to the novels or whatever. I wouldn't know. Gakuen Alice. This was an odd one. This is one of those shows that, like, the whole way through I was kind of struggling with it because it's a shoujo series about a girl who goes to, I want to say, like, a psychic high school. I don't even really remember. Pretty sure, like, her parents were dead and she was, like, all alone. It's one of those shows where, like, everyone beats up on the main character. Like, the thrust of the show is that she's just an innocent little girl and everyone else is a total dickhole. But some of the characters are pretty entertaining. I remember her, like, best friend character, who's, like, some kind of dry comedy sort of thing, being really funny. And the show has some emotional moments and some good stuff in it, but then it also kind of drags, and it's also really shoujo-y, and I don't like that kind of story where it's just about beating up on an innocent character, because I always just am like, why? So, yeah, like, I was really struggling with it, and I think the only reason I finished it is because I was watching it with my brother Shade. So, I probably would have given it, like, I would say if I watched it now, maybe, like, a 5. You know, it's that kind of show that is, I can't see myself watching it again, even though I got something out of it. But, like, there was so much push and pull that it's hard to imagine I'd watch it twice. Maho Shoujo Lyrical Nanoha. I absolutely hated that show when I watched it. I really, really hated Nanoha. I think I'd given it like a 1 at the time. It's just so fucking boring. Because it goes from being this really standard, like insultingly so, almost, like, I think some people consider it a parody of Cardcaptor Sakura. It's not. It's just a bad version of Cardcaptor Sakura at first. And then it changes gears when Fate shows up, and it becomes just about Nanoha trying to convince Fate to let her talk to her. And, like, there's no way to be interested in Fate at this point because she's not a character yet. Like, we also don't know anything about her, so, like, I don't give a fuck. And it's just, like, 2 episodes of Nanoha trying to get Fate to open up. Then we finally do learn about Fate's past, and, like, once the story really gets moving, it gets really weird in kind of an interesting way, but it's not good. Then they made the movie, which I felt, when I saw the movie, I thought it was like a much better version of the show because it condenses the really shitty like beginning episodes, but then it also almost adds stuff in the later part and makes it like even more just bloated, and the story sucks of the original Nanoha. It's not good. So I would probably give this anime like a 2 or a 3, and even the movie I only give like a 4 or a 5 now, I think, somewhere in this list. It's you know, it's not good. A's is a lot better, and even that's a 7, apparently, according to this list. Mobile Fighter G Gundam. This is a show that I kind of hold it near and dear. It's just so much fun. Like, G Gundam is one of the most fun anime ever made. Probably the most fun mecha series I can name. And that's saying something, because mecha series are usually quite fun. But it's just this really goofy, over-the-top, hot-blooded mecha action show about every nation has their own mech, which is built around the stereotypes of that nation, and they all fight for global dominance with the Earth itself as the ring, because everyone who's important lives in colonies now. Now, the thing about G Gundam, why I can't see myself rating it super highly, even though I love like half of the show, is that the other half is utterly stupid. This is a show where you really have a mixed bag of episodes, and it helps to know ahead of time. Like, I hope somebody makes a watching guide for this show, because, like, the first half of the show, I'd say any episode that's, like, introducing a major character or features the return of a major character is good. Anyone that's just, like, a one-off, like, fighting Neo-Mexico or whatever, and they have, like, some sob story that's for just that episode that you don't give a fuck about, those episodes suck. And then there's like a really, epic midpoint kind of climax. Then you get into the second half of the show, and once again, there's some episodes that are just totally useless, and others that are amazing. So I'd probably end up giving it like a 7 because of that. And even the last time I watched it, which was long ago, we had skipped like a significant number of episodes. So yeah, I can't imagine watching it like all the way through, because it's 49 episodes and so many of them are stupid, but like nonetheless, it's overall a really fun show that I think is very much worth watching. And it's got some of the most memorable music and dialogue in a action series. Last Exile. I don't know how I'd feel about this show if I watched it today. This is one of those that was kind of a cult favorite back in the day, mostly for its visuals. This was one of the early Rangi Murata character design shows. It was an early, like, heavy use of CG show from Gonzo, which has aged, it's kind of aged, because, like, the thing about the show that made it work at the time was that it focused so much on beautiful art design that the CG could kind of slide. But watching it now, like, the CG is so dated that it kind of feels like, man, if this just didn't have the CG, it would look beautiful. I don't know. And the plot is, it starts off as just kind of an adventure show that doesn't feel like it's even gonna have an overarching plot. Then it kind of becomes like a really weird war story where, I don't know, I remember feeling like the main characters were out of place in the narrative. Like, the narrative that develops around them doesn't really fit the tone of the show that had been set up so far. So I remember being kind of let down by it in the end and thinking it was like a strong 6, light 7 kind of show. If I watched it now, I'd probably give it a 6, I'm going to say. The fact that it's 26 episodes really concerns me, because I feel like as much as we all wish that anime were longer like they used to be, the biggest problem with that was when you had a 26 episode show that meanders and ends up being disappointing, and then you wasted a lot of time, as opposed to just a little time. But whatever. I'm sure it's still a fairly interesting show, but it definitely doesn't have the same level of visual splendor it did when it came out. My Hime, this is what I like to view this as kind of the origin of like the moe action show or like the cute girls action show, stuff like Symphogear, I feel like owes a lot to this. And I'm having a hard time like determining whether that's the case, because I don't really know where My Hime came from. Like, if you look at the shows at the time, I don't think there was anything that was quite this level of, like, the main characters are just this really big cast of cute girls with distinct personalities, and they're all action heroes. And, like, there's some other shows that came soon afterwards that are obviously like My Hime. Like, I would say Uchu no Stelvia is very similar, though less action-focused. Idolmaster Xenoglacia was definitely just, like, put Idolmasters in My Hime, and also there's mechs. And then it's kind of evolved from there. It's just weird that, like, I don't know what I don't know if that show just came out of the blue and created this whole fucking genre and no one talks about it, or if maybe it came from something, like there was like a clear trend that I just haven't been able to see. But it's weird because it's a show that's not amazing. Like, it definitely has stuff going for it. The fact that it was quite shocking, like it had a lot of death and like rape and stuff in it. Not a lot of rape, it had like one lesbian rape in there, but there's a lot of death, and you know, it felt very dramatic and hardcore for a show about cute girls, and I feel like that trend has continued to this day. But the shows that have built on top of it are perhaps better. Like, you're more likely gonna watch like Madoka Magica or something than go back to My Hime. It's the same type of show, and Madoka is a lot better, and I think more of what's coming out now owes to Madoka than it does to My Hime, but certainly that's all kind of a continuum there. Air. Oh, and what I would score My Hime now, probably a 6, maybe a 7. Maybe it's better than I remember. I really don't know. Air is a show that I was really into when I first saw it. It was one of my first shows about girls that I ever watched, because for me, 2007, like early 2007, was my like exposure to any genre that wasn't action and shonen, you know, like just people beating the shit out of each other. And Air got me pretty emotional. The later half of the show doesn't make any fucking sense, but it was interesting. And I remember like almost crying a couple times in some of the early episodes, but like, and then I rewatched it a couple years later and still thought it was kind of cool, but I don't know. I don't know how I'd feel about it now. I've gone back to revisit Canon, because I also really liked Canon at the time, 2006, and I thought it was okay. Like, I watched the first 8 episodes and I just kind of lost interest, and I gave it a 5. I was like, yeah, it's fine. It's just like, I feel similarly about Clannad. I think Canon's less boring than Clannad, but also Clannad has better characters. I don't know. It's hard to fucking say, but they're all dumb. So, like, I don't know. Air is so much weirder than those two that maybe that would be a good thing or a bad thing. I don't know. Haven't seen it in a long time. So I'm going to say I probably wouldn't give it more than a 6, just because I've seen the show twice and I still barely remember it. So I don't think it's something that's going to hang on to me in a strong way. King of Bandits Jing. This one's a tough one because I love the manga. Absolutely adore the manga of King of Bandits Jing. And the anime series usually gets more praise than the manga. A lot of people praise the fact that, because the manga's artwork is really confusing, like, it's insanely detailed and everything's fucking weird, so sometimes you just stare at a panel for like a minute, like wondering what the fuck you're looking at. The anime is much more coherent because it has color, and it really brings the world to life in a good way. Like, they chose great colors for it. However, the animation is shitty. And so, like, whereas the manga is really breathtaking in, like, the skills of this artist, the anime ends up making you go, like, oh, this kind of just looks cheap. And also, they ruined Jing's personality. Because in the manga, he's, like, a cheeky kid. He's kind of, like, a little bit more shonen-y, especially in the early chapters. Like, he kind of becomes a little bit more standoffish as the series goes along and just becomes so dreamlike that you can barely understand what's happening. But in the anime, they just gave him no personality. He's just a very, like, calm, collected, he's just kind of there. He's really boring and stoic, and I don't know why they did that, because it makes it a lot less interesting. Like, the early chapters of the manga are really funny, and the anime doesn't quite have that comedic edge to it. So yeah, I don't know. It's okay as an adaptation. Like, there's reasons to watch it in addition to reading the manga, just because seeing it in color is really nice. It also only adapts like some random chapters. It doesn't do the whole thing. So, I want to say I'd probably give it like a 5 or a 6, depending on how, and like, maybe if I watched it without reading the manga, like right beforehand, which I think I did last time I watched it, I'd enjoy it more because I'd be like seeing these fresh, interesting concepts like with a fresh mind, as opposed to like seeing a watered down version of what I feel like I got in the manga. But who knows? I would have to watch it again. Cromartie High School. This was a really solid comedy series. Great voice acting. Great, which a lot of people, I've never seen the dub of this. A lot of people say you have to watch it dubbed. I thought the Japanese version was fucking hilarious. So, whichever works for you, I guess. The Japanese one has Norio Wakamoto as the fucking robot, which is hilarious. It's just a really solid show with really fun gag characters. The episodes are a little shorter than normal. It almost outstays its welcome, but doesn't quite. It's one of those where like the jokes kind of get repetitive after a while, but it's still solid all the way through. And some of the episodes are like gut busting. So I'd probably give it like an 8 if it's as good as I remember. Next up is the original Full Metal Alchemist, and I am not a fan of the original because when I was a kid, this show came on Cartoon Network in like 2005, and I was really into it. I loved it. I loved Edward Elric. I loved the performances and everything. I thought it was really solid. I was watching it on Adult Swim. And I got 26 episodes in, and that's when they reset and they just did the whole everything up to that point again. So I moved house right before they got to new episodes. So like I'd caught up on like everything I'd missed because of all the what the fuck is the word for broadcasting something again? Not rebroadcast, but I don't remember. I haven't seen TV in long enough. Rerun. Because of the reruns, I had caught up on the story, but then I moved house to somewhere that had no cable and never got to see the second half. So for years, I hadn't seen the second half. I watched Brotherhood and really liked it. And then, like, I thought, well, okay, I have to wait years before I watch the original again. So I did. I waited like a year and a half, finally watched the entirety of the original. And first of all, a lot of the early episodes fucking blow. Like, a lot of the filler episodes where the message is always just, the villain is just like Ed, somehow. Like, the Phantom Thief one is dumb, even though, like, that one's a little charming. The one with the other Elric brothers, I fucking hate. It's a 2-part episode that are both terrible. The one where they go to, like, some village where there's, like a Will-o'-the-Wisp or something like that. I don't even fucking remember. There's a lot of stupid episodes in the first half. Now, I will say that the build-up to Hughes getting, is much better in the original show because he's around for a lot longer. And, like, you really have, like, an intimate relationship with this guy by the time he's gone. And a lot of people criticize Brotherhood for the fact that it doesn't deliver on that as much. But, like, the consequence of that is a lot of shitty episodes that are hard to rewatch. Now, granted, there are some good filler episodes. The Barry the Chopper episode, like, the one that establishes who he is, which isn't even in the original manga or Brotherhood, is really good. But there's just so much bullshit. Then you get to the second half of the show, and it becomes a fucking nightmare. Like, everything involving the villain, Dante, I thought was the stupidest shit in the world. The ending fucking blows. I've got a huge post I wrote about this. Frank Archer is one of the worst ideas ever that has ever been had by humans. Frank Archer is the worst thing that happens in that show, particularly robot Frank Archer. If you don't remember that, if you've blocked that out, every time I talk about Full Metal Alchemist, the original show, with someone, and I'm like shitting on it, at some point I bring up Frank Archer, and they're like, what was that again? And I'm like, see, you have tricked yourself. You've blocked out the memory of this because it's so stupid you can't believe it's real. Go look up Robo Frank Archer and just remind yourself what happens in the end of this show. It's really bad. So I'd probably give that like a 5 because on the one hand, like half of it is really strong. Half of it is Full Metal Alchemist, a great story with lots of interesting world building, great characters, great animation. They did more with the animation and directing in the original show. Like, there are definitely reasons to champion the original over Brotherhood, but they are not narrative reasons. And I can't stomach giving it a higher score than that when so much of it is so stupid. Futakoi Alternative. This is like the weirdest show ever made, and I'm always like recommending it to people, but kind of tenuously because I don't know what you're gonna get out of it. It's a show that starts off as like a really over-the-top, wacky action comedy, and then becomes a slice of life show, and then becomes a hardcore drama, and then becomes a goofy, over-the-top action comedy, but with an epic romance plot backing it. It's all over the place. It's all kinds of things, and like parts of it aren't that good. You know, like I would say the dramatic part. I mean, from what I remember being like really upset with that part of the show. Like, okay, well, this got boring and stupid, and then all of a sudden the ending is like awesome, and so. I don't know. I don't know what to say about it. I'd probably give it a 6 or a 7 if I watched it today. I'd given it a 6 back then. I feel like I'd feel the exact same way about it now. But it has been a decade, so don't fucking quote me on that. Like, I have no idea. But yeah, it's an odd show. It's worth watching just for being so fucking weird and, you know, having some good stuff about it. Gunslinger Girl. Gunslinger Girl, the anime is interesting because on the one hand, it's really, really good. And on the other hand, it almost doesn't even get to the like real appeal of Gunslinger Girl, the manga. Because the anime covers like 2 volumes of a 15-volume manga. It's very stretched out. Like, it's very spacey and kind of... It's got this very gorgeous, like, washed-out aesthetic. It's beautiful to look at, albeit very slow and methodical. And it takes itself very seriously, which, I mean, the manga takes itself pretty seriously, too. But, like, the anime just makes it feel a little bit different, and it focuses on somewhat different stuff because it's like they thought they were only making 13 episodes. So they kind of move the emotional climax upwards a bit and, like, put in, like, they kind of change what the message of the show is just a little bit so that it can conclude in 13 episodes having made a point, whereas the manga just keeps going and makes it has a hell of a lot more going on. But, like, the show doesn't even get to, like, when the manga really picks up and gets awesome. So it's great. It's a great show, just weird in that it covers so little. I'd probably give it a 6 or a 7 if I watched it today. I think, I think it's a little slower than it needs to be. But again, this is another one that's been like a decade since I last saw it, so I don't want to say anything too definitive about it. Just going on my vague memories. This Ugly Yet Beautiful World. I really didn't like this show. This is probably my least favorite Gainax show ever. Like, Gainax has a lot of shows that people don't remember, and it's funny because everyone acts like now the studio's totally gone downhill because they're producing, like, more normal anime, but, like, they were doing that for forever, and this is an early example from 2004. It's kind of just a harem comedy, but that has weird aspirations to have this deeper, like, I don't know, Eva-esque twist or whatever to it that just doesn't, it's not good. Like, the first episode has this big, awesome action scene, and then the next few are just totally boilerplate rom-com bullshit, but with tits. I'll give it that. At least it has tits. Gainax never fails with the tits. But then there's like one random like beach episode that has a kick-ass action scene, then it becomes rote all over again, gets a little melodramatic, and then the last couple episodes is like the fucking world ends, And there's like all this drivel dialogue about like the meaning of life, and it's fucking dumb. It's really dumb. It's really bad. And this is one of the only anime I've ever passed out watching. I was trying to marathon it in one night, like after school in high school, and like episode 11 I just clonked out, and I was really struggling to hold on. Like I clonked out, like woke back up, and it just kept going, and I was like, no, this is too stupid. So if I watched that today, I'd probably give it like a 2. Like, I don't think it has many redeeming qualities. It's pretty fucking dumb. And that about hits us at 30 minutes. So tune in a couple of days, and I'll have another episode of this out. If you thought this kind of weird shotgun reviewing of shows I haven't watched in 10 years was entertaining, yeah, stick around for more. I'll see you then.